friends.
No further fuel price revision this month, says CPC. Situation is dire, but does the war bring opportunities for Sri Lanka? Houthis join conflict nations together in Pakistan for talks.
The top story on Gold FM.
Opportunities that were existing for Sri Lanka are being highlighted by the Middle East conflict. That's according to economist Talal Rafi, who was speaking at the BIMT Economic Forum. First speaking on the impact of the war, Rafi was of the opinion that the immediate concern is one of endurance. While oil remains a pressing issue, it is not the only resource threatened by the war.
A lot depends on how long it's going to. If it's
1 or 2 months, we have some fiscal buffer, so it should be okay. But beyond a certain period, then we would be getting into trouble, because unlike Hurricane Ditwa, this is going to hit us on multiple fronts. If oil, for example, stays at $100 on average for the next 6 months, then the impact is going to be another $1 billion on the reserves. And tourism could get affected because a third of the flights come from the Middle East area. Remittances, about $3 to $4 billion. Even if there is a 20% decrease, that could be another $800 million on the current account. And this is not just about oil and gas. 1/3 of fertilizer comes to the region. Helium, which is used for semiconductors to other things, sulfur. And not only that, the closure also impacts it, because people talk about what comes out this way, but then it's also about what goes in. 80% of food for the GCC countries is also going into that area through the Strait of Hormuz, because those countries don't have agriculture. I mean, they import most of their food. And there is always a thing that if there's a desalination plant, for example, Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia, 85% of their water needs come from a desalination plant. So they say if that is hit, almost the entire city of close to 10 million people has to be evacuated. So that's going to affect our remittances. So this will be an impact on a multiple scale. But even if it's 6 months down the line, like the central bank governor says, we could absorb the shock. But the only problem is it leaves our reserves more vulnerable for something else that's coming. Of course, very unfortunately, our debt repayments start in 28, sort of a breather. But it's a coincidence that during this breather also happens to be when Trump will be the president of the year. So that's almost guaranteeing shocks. I don't think even he knows what he's going to bring up next year.
Rafi also warned that stability is fragile, and that can be illustrated through history.
But where do we go from here? It's very, very good that we are focusing on fiscal stability. But one thing I would like to state is that the need for reforms, structural reforms, to change the way we operate. Currently, if you look at stability, primary surpluses, current accounts, these are good. But that alone is a base on which you need to build up. I'll give you 2 examples. One, Mexico. From 1983 to 1994. For 11 years, Mexico had a primary surplus. For economic stability, every indicator was positive, like currently how we are. But in 1994, it only took 6 months for them to reach the almost bankruptcy. Of course, the US Treasury and the IMF had to come in. And the reason was because the US Federal Reserve increased interest rates. The other example is, of course, the Asian financial crisis. Of course, Thailand and others went into crisis. Fiscal stability, everything was fine. They were performing very well on the budget. They were very disciplined. Problem again was that money started going out when there was Thailand tried to do something with their currency. The reason was, instead of FDI, most of the focus in, for example, Thailand and other countries impacted by the Asian financial crisis was that they started borrowing, both from bonds and others. And the private sector also started borrowing in dollar terms, and they invested in long-term projects and in industries which brought in domestic revenue. So when there was a panic and investors want to pull the money out, they couldn't do it. So that was what set off a chain reaction, which also led to the Russian financial crisis.
Against this backdrop, Rafi is calling for Sri Lanka to pivot.
One is exports, and we need to be in the global supply chains. 70 to 75% of global trade is supplying value chains of multinational companies. If you look at, for example, global exports, 82% of global exports are done by multinational companies. 64% of knowledge-intensive exports are done by multinational companies. You see, 40% of global trade is concentrated trade. So countries specialize. Taiwan, semiconductor, Germany, Japan, and now China into cars. So what we need to do is find out what is our comparative advantage. And just one example, Japan in the 1950s. Japan was unique. In the 1950s, after the Second World War, the specific thing was which sectors to shut down. Shut down the unproductive sectors, and those human resources, capital, which are being used for unproductive sectors which don't bring in dollar revenue, which only survive because of government subsidies, those things automatically go into the more productive sector. The second thing is FDI, foreign direct investment. That's, this whole period of 2028 was given so that that could come in. FDI is more long term. It changes our economy structurally. I think those 2 factors we need to focus on.
Getting to the opportunities presented by the war, Rafi noted that Sri Lanka's greatest permanent asset in this transition is its geography.
Not just with this crisis, but even without, we have a great opportunity. The first thing, without a doubt, would be ports. But the thing is, there are caps on foreign ownership. Some of the largest shipping companies may not be that willing to be junior partners to companies here. So that is a critical area which I have heard it from their own mouths. So once you do this, of course we may think that firms here do it, but when you have it, for example, like hotels, when you bring luxury brands, they bring in the tourists themselves. Similarly, shipping has a great role, right? Because right now, whether this crisis is resolved today, even if it is, and even if there is, for example, changes there permanently, the situation is not going to get back to normal. The Jebel Ali port, people will always look it as a risk factor. So this is an opportunity for Sri Lanka to capitalize on that. Very, very critical, especially if we can get foreign people to operate ports. So countries develop because of ports. Dubai is an example, Singapore, and you look at Amsterdam, Netherlands, how did they grow? I mean, it's the ports. When you have ports and become one of the largest transshipment hubs, local firms here benefit supplying them. The other thing, just talking about ports and logistics, would be a airline hub. Now you see a third of flights come through that region. So right now, people may think twice, but then you have the airlines like Qatar, Emirates. Of course, what's happening right now at Makala is positive, but if we can make sure and pass the correct thing so that this can be something more permanent, that will be another great benefit for us. I always spoke about comparative advantage. So the three things, first thing, comparative advantage, port. And this is not something that a country like Russia or anybody can. This is unique to us. Geography is not going to change.
The second pillar of this transformation is energy.
The second thing is renewable energy. $4.5 billion a year goes to importing oil. So if you take apparel, yes, we do export around $5 billion, but inputs to that comes to $3 billion. So the net exports of apparel is only $2 billion. And you take tea, rubber, coconut, all of these come around $4.5 billion or below it. The income from most of our key sectors is just going to importing oil. And if it stays at $100 for the next 12 months, I mean, it's going to pass around close to $7 billion. In offshore wind energy itself, according to the World Bank, we have in excess of our demand so that we can export it. Solar, of course, we have the potential. Hydro, you know that we have one of the highest river densities in the world. Biomass. One thing is when you have excess energy, how do we export it? One thing is definitely hydrogen. You can convert it into hydrogen form, maybe sell it off to Singapore, others, that's expensive. But the easiest way, which I've always said, is connect the grid to India. And they are rising. For example, South India, it's a $1 trillion economy. According to Deloitte, Tamil Nadu is going to be a $1 trillion economy by 2030. And if you look at the way they are growing, Tamil Nadu itself by the mid-2040s can have a larger economy than Russia. So here again, you have a energy-hungry South India. So we can become a net energy exporter.
The third pillar Rafi spoke about was tourism.
Third thing is, of course, tourism. There also we have a unique advantage. Here again, the critical thing, of course, the infrastructure. Because one of the things is, they say the airline connectivity from Europe, you can get a ticket to Bangkok at a much cheaper rate. Here, how do we do that? That is one area. We always talk about getting the high-end tourists. Of course, our local brands are doing a fine job, but when you have very high-end international hotels coming in, they bring their own clients in. And other thing is, of course, the infrastructure, the road connectivity, others. I mean, most people who come on a very limited trip of 5 or 6 days, sometimes you want to go to Trincomalee, 7 hours, 8 hours. So the expressways. There are very, very good areas in Sri Lanka that are still unexplored. Extend the expressway all the way to Putlam or Mannar. No little hurdle because the land is there. Then you open up things to Vilpattur, Kalpitiya. So I think those 3 areas would be the opportunity.
This is the local news on Gold FM.
There will be no fuel price revision at the end of this month. That was confirmed by Ceylon Petroleum Corporation Chairman DJ Rajkaruna. Speaking at a press briefing at the Department of Government Information, the chairman also revealed that authorities are considering the suspension of the current odd-even number plate fuel rationing system in the near future. The chairman noted that the National Fuel Pass QR system is scheduled for its weekly update tonight. Furthermore, he highlighted that the CPC is looking into implementing a specialized QR-based mechanism to streamline fuel distribution for the agricultural sector and other specific industries. During the briefing, he noted that Sri Lanka has sufficient stocks of octane 92 and 95 petrol to last until the first week of June, factoring in upcoming fuel shipments. 2 fuel vessels carrying petrol and diesel arrived at the Colombo port today. This is according to Ceylon Petroleum Corporation Managing Director Mayura Nettikumarage. The shipments consist of 35,000 metric tons of petrol and 35,000 metric tons of diesel. Additionally, an Indian vessel arrived at the Colombo port early this morning carrying a combined total of 38,000 metric tons of diesel and petrol. This specific delivery follows recent high-level diplomatic discussions between the Sri Lankan and Indian governments to ensure a steady energy supply. The Ceylon Petroleum Corporation appointed 5 officials to investigate fuel-related problems and carry out necessary interventions, with the appointments covering all government ministries. According to the Presidential Media Division, the officials are tasked with identifying fuel issues arising within institutions under each ministry, coordinating with the corporation, and providing solutions to ensure uninterrupted fuel supply.
Now for some news in brief.
No significant rainfall is expected across Sri Lanka over the next 10 days, meaning that the heat index, or the temperature felt by the human body, is likely to rise further in the coming days.
The business news on Gold FM.
European Union Trade Commissioner Maros Šefčovič described his meeting with US Trade Representative Jamieson Greer on the sidelines of the WTO ministerial meeting in Cameroon as very positive, with both sides agreeing to advance cooperation on critical minerals and discussing tariffs.
International news on Gold FM.
Yemen's Iran-backed Houthi rebels launched their first direct attack on Israel since the outbreak of the US-Israeli war on Iran, marking a significant escalation in the 5-week-old conflict. The group confirmed they fired a barrage of ballistic missiles at military sites in the south of the occupied West Bank. The Israeli military says it intercepted at least 1 missile launched from Yemen. A Houthi spokesperson stated the operations will continue until aggression against Iran and its allies ceases. Experts warn the move could threaten the Bab al-Mandeb Strait, a vital global shipping choke point which connects the Red Sea to the Gulf of Aden. Meanwhile, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian told Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif during an hour-long phone call that trust is essential to facilitate talks and mediation on the Middle East conflict, according to Pakistan's Prime Minister's office. According to Sharif, Pezeshkian praised Pakistan's diplomatic efforts as Sharif briefed him on Islamabad's contacts with the United States and Gulf states in a bid to help end the regional hostilities. Pakistan also announced that it will host the foreign ministers of Saudi Arabia, Turkey and Egypt from tomorrow for 2 days of talks on the month-old Iran war, as Islamabad positions itself as a potential venue for US-Iran negotiations. Pakistan's foreign ministry said the discussions will cover a range of issues, including efforts to de-escalate tensions in the region. In the United Arab Emirates, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard claims to have destroyed a Ukrainian anti-drone depot in Dubai. The IRGC alleged the facility was assisting US forces. However, Ukraine's foreign ministry has flatly denied the claim, calling it a lie and part of an Iranian disinformation campaign. This comes as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky made a visit to the UAE and Qatar to deepen defense cooperation. Qatar and Ukraine later signed a defense cooperation agreement which includes the exchange of expertise in countering missiles and drone systems.
Entertainment news on Gold FM.
Amazon MGM Studios' Project Hail Mary is heading for a strong $46.8 million second weekend, bringing its 10-day domestic total to $156.5 million.
Sports news on Gold FM.
Jaden Amaravira's unbeaten 184 powered St. Thomas's to a massive 313-4, but Royal College secured a 16-run DLS victory in the 49th Mustangs Trophy. Led by Vimat Dinsara's gritty unbeaten 109, Royal reached 291-6 in 46 overs to retain the title in a high-scoring thriller at the SSC. That's it for the news. I'm Atik Rumi. Have a great evening.